AUECA Conference of Ministers of Finance took place in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia from 25th to 31st March 2015. The theme of the conference centered around Agenda 2063. How to raise finance and implement Agenda 2063? Mr. Carlos Lopes, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Commission for Africa, explains. Mr. Lopes, 2015 is a critical year. The journey towards Africa of 2063 has already started. Question is, how to get there? How can Africa achieve its goals? But most importantly, is Africa ready?
Well, you see that we didn't wait for 2015 to start. We started in 2013 by defining that the need for a new vision, and a vision for an Africa that will be prosperous, in peace with itself, and capable of really changing the economic structures that we have been under since colonial times. I think we are ready.
What are the key priorities of this Agenda 2063?
We look into Agenda 2063 as a process, and we started with a very large consultation and making sure that Agenda 2063 was a reflection of many views, many opinions, and also a very good combination of the various visions that different countries have been working on. We have about 32 African countries that have been working on visions or long-term planning. So it was important to assemble all that very crucial and critical information. Under the leadership of the African Union, we had also the heads of state approving aspirations document that gave guidance about the contents of what Africans are after. And I would say in very short type of proposition that we are going to have by 2063 30% of the world's population. My own take is that we are looking into an Africa that is also 30% of the world's wealth. And to get there, we need to really transform the basis of our economies. And we need to make more inclusive societies, because we are not going to attain that type of caliber of development if we continue to have the inequalities that we are witnessing. And we have also to aspire that Africa is going to play a much more modern role in the world, because there is no reason why we shouldn't. 30 years ago, if you had asked the question, people would not have thought that China would be where it is. So now it's our turn.
Mm-hmm. What key actions should be taken to achieve those goals?
One of the critical actions is for us to be able to define with clarity what we mean by structural transformation. We are saying the main entry point is industrialization. Industrialization serves to pool agricultural productivity, serves to modernize services, which are the three components of an economy. And we are saying that this requires much more than just goodwill. It requires very consistent policies, strategies that are extremely smart. We have to use trade as an entry point for industrialization. We have to understand global value chains, because production today is not like in Manchester in the 19th century, or Latin America when they introduced import substitution, or more recently Southeast Asia when they introduced the export-driven model. Ours has to be about our demographics, huge middle-class growth, youngest labor force in the world, largest labor force by 2040, and of course all of this is a cocktail for immense opportunities or for immense problems, depending on how we deal with this transformation.
Now, coming to the funding, the finance of the projects, how will Africa finance the projects necessary to get where it will be in 2063?
We have to stop thinking that we are going to develop because we are going to get aid money. As much as I love for us to get aid money, it's $52 billion a year, which more or less corresponds to our infrastructure gap of funding per year. And we have so many other things to do. So where is the money going to come from? In fact, the money already exists. It's in pockets that have not been addressed in terms of regulations, policies, incentives, and so on. Central bank reserves in Africa have between 400 and 500 billion dollars. Pension funds just in South Africa and Nigeria are in $180 billion mark. Our migrants send about $62 billion a year. And I can go on with the list. Illicit financial flows is 50 billion. You have so many streams that are not used properly because nobody's putting one and one together. That's what we are doing now.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned innovative financing. What do you mean by that?
We mean, for instance, climate financing. We are going to do our industrialization by not imitating others in terms of technology. We are latecomers. You know, when you are a latecomer, you don't go into the technology of the past.
Yes.
You just jump into the latest. Like, for instance, we may not have had telephones for a long time, but now you are not going to start establishing landlines. You are going to give people cell phones. The same will happen with the industry. We are going to leapfrog, and most of what we need to do is going to be green industrialization. That requires innovative funding because it's going to be funding related to climate. And climate financing is one opportunity that is probably more appealing to Africa than any other region.
You talked earlier about the central banks. What role can they play in mobilizing funds for the projects, for the development of Africa?
They can play a very big role because the central banks, they normally take care of the monetary policies. They make sure that the prices are right, that the inflation is under control, and they are very cautious in the way they invest the money of the public purse because they don't want to take too much risk. That's the characteristic of a reserve. But this being said, I think they have been overcautious and not daring enough in entering in the terrain of transformation. Transformation is about looking into how you grow your cake. And I think the central bank governors of Africa have a much more space to integrate this debate about transformation than other players. The good news is that last year we had a caucus of African central bank governors. We are going to have a second one this year. And this discussion is moving in the right direction. The number one thing they can do is to actually make sure that all these reserves they have is partly invested in Africa. Right now it's not the case.
So it means they're going to move away from their traditional role.
Well, yes, I think it's correct to say it, although it's better defined to say that they are going to be much more macro in their approach than just, being monetarists.
Mm-hmm. Now, all this is very good, finding the finance and having all those projects with regards to Agenda 2063. But at the end of the day, it's the politicians who are going to implement them in their own countries. Do they have the capacity to do so?
Well, some do, and they have demonstrated by actually leading the reforms. They have strategic thinking, they have very good planning, and they are actually moving very fast, and they are growing, some even double-digit. So I think we should be also capable of recognizing incredible efforts. Some have been so conservative in their macroeconomic management that they are the envy of the world. A country like Algeria has a 2% debt to GDP ratio and has $180 billion of reserves. That's almost 3 times what Russia has. So I think we have lots of good management that is also creating opportunities for investment across the continent. But of course you are right, many are not there. So we need to help everybody in the class to be moving in the right direction. And that is part of the effort that organizations like ECA should be focusing on. I think we have enough requests on the part of these governments, so there is appetite. And when there is appetite, you serve a good meal, people eat.
Now, let's talk about the illicit financial flows. There has been a report. Do we know the extent of this phenomenon?
We are touching the surface. Actually, it has become a global problem. The G8 is interested in the issue, but from the angle of taxation. The OECD is actually looking into fiscal paradises and safe havens, jurisdictions with special treatment. and they are trying to put order into that. A lot of countries are concerned with what is called the Starbucks phenomena, which is you have your activity in one country but you pay taxes on another. It's not linked to the activities per se. And finally, we have the US government that has taken legislative decisions on this front with Dodd-Frank legislation. You have Canada also very prominent in putting order into this type of illicit financial flows related to natural resources. So Africans are not entering into this debate alone. A lot of people are interested. But our angle is different. And so what we need is to take advantage of this growing interest to push the agenda in the direction that is of interest to the continent. And I think it is very interesting to say that, what we have been able to demonstrate so far through research is enough to create a lot of political attention. And this political attention now has to be translated into policies.
So there will be mechanisms put into place from Africa's side to avert such losses.
Exactly. At the national level, you also need some that are at a continental level, like for instance what we are negotiating on the trade front. But we also need to have global solutions. This is a local problem with global solutions.
Now, in moving towards Agenda 2063, let us take a step back. What would you say have been the challenges in the past 50 years and things that should not be repeated moving on?
I think it's a very wise exercise for us to look into what has not worked in the past. And I think number one that has not worked is that we didn't change the structure of our economies. We continue to have an agriculture with a productivity level that is of the 70s. We continue to have manufacturing value addition going down. Our trade size, although it has increased in the last 15 years, still is not at the level that we had in the 70s, which was much higher. And all of this has one word. We have not changed the economic structures. We have continued to just export raw what we have as comparative advantage, and we have not been able to create the jobs. We export the jobs with the products, and then we import transformed products that we have to pay very expensive. So in simple terms, this is the problem. And this is the problem of the last 50 years. Are we going to have an Africa in 2063 that has not addressed this issue? I hope not. And I will fight with all my force for it to be very different.
And are we going to, when it comes to 2063, most probably most of us won't be around, then they will say, oh, no, it didn't work. Such things didn't work in the last 50 years. The same thing will be repeated.
Well, in the last 15 years, Africa GDP has doubled, so that's not a small feat. In fact, there is only one other region of the world historically that has managed to have a doubling of its GDP in such a short period of time, 15 years, that's China. So if that is any ingredient of hope, is quite an important and colossal one. So our responsibilities in this generation is to continue not only growing, but using this growth for this transformation I was talking about. Because if we just have to show growth, we are also going to show that some people have become very rich, the consumption of the elite has gone up considerably, but we have not changed the reality of the continent. So it is really our responsibility to not let that happen.
Mr. Lopes, the role of women in Agenda 2063, how do you see it?
Well, we have really thought of women and gender issues as something that we sprinkle at the top of the cake. When in fact, we are doing research to demonstrate that in the cycle of life, the economic contribution of women is extremely important, but is not recognized by the statistics. So the first thing we have to rectify is our own perception about what the contribution is already, because we think we need to sort of do a favor by bringing women into the economic activity, when in fact, they are already quite present but not recognized. Mm-hmm. So the first thing is to recognize already that contribution. On the agriculture and primary sector is overwhelmingly a contribution from women. It's not recognized by the statistics. And if we do that work of recognition of the current contribution, then it will be easier for us to address what is the immediate needs to increase productivity of this contribution. And one is access to land in terms of rights of property. Another is access to capital, through loans and banking facilities. Another one is to make sure that social protection is valued economically, that is a money value, and then we will be able to have policies that are consistent with that valuation, which is not the case right now. So all of this is taken for free, which will not allow for real investments in these sectors in taking into consideration long-term policies. But then that is just the second phase. What we need really is to also empower women. By empowering them through education, through health policies, we are going to make sure that they have also their opportunity in what we are calling for, which is industrialization.
Mm-hmm. Because we always hear integrating women, but we never hear integrating men.
Exactly, because of this problem of recognition in the first place.
Yes. Mr. Lopes, thank you very much.
Thank you.